Manx Radio's Update with Beth Espy.
Well, good evening, Fastamai, and welcome to Update, your chance to catch up on what's been happening around the Isle of Man today. Coming up in the next half hour, the rumbles after the resignations. We're going to bring you some of the rather feisty comments that were directed at the former Health Minister in Tynwald today. More on that in a few minutes. We'll also hear from the MHK, who believes it might be time to start the conversation about there being no confidence in the current administration. And later, if you're hoping for a glimpse of royalty tomorrow, we'll give you all the details about where you need to be. Of course, we'll keep an eye on the roads and the travel situation as well. And as ever, if you'd like to get in touch, you can text 166 177 or email studio@manxradio.com. First, let's join Lewis for a roundup of today's main news headlines.
Fastamai, Treasury has outlined its annual plan, which includes developments and improvements it aims to implement over the next year. Minister Alex Allinson has committed to demanding more focused attention from government departments to ensure they stay within budget. The former Health Minister has hit back at comments from the Chief Minister in Tynwald this morning after Alfred Cannon accused Laurie Hooper of gaslighting the island's Parliament. Mr Cannon told the court the Ramsey MHK had fabricated claims he wants to privatise the health service and described Mr Hooper's resignation speech as a stitch-up. Mr Hooper said it was incredulous behaviour from Mr Cannon. More on that shortly. The chair of Ramsey Commissioners says the weekend closure of the minor injuries unit at the Cottage Hospital is a turning of the screw to cutting services in the north. Rob Cowell says he understands savings need to be made, but believes these should be dealt with across central government. And two MHKs are set to fly to Australia next month to attend the 67th Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Conference. Claire Christian and Rob Callister have been chosen to represent Tynwald at the event. They will travel in economy class with all flight costs funded by the CPA. In the latest international news, economists say an interest rate cut next month is now nailed on after UK inflation fell to 1.7% in September. The drop was driven by cheaper fuel, but it's bad news for people on benefits across, as the lower-than-expected figure will set next year's increase. A 7-year-old boy died in a blast which has torn apart homes in a street in Newcastle. 6 others are in hospital with what are described as varying injuries after the explosion in Benwell early this morning. And Thomas Tuchel's confirmed he's targeting World Cup glory after being appointed England manager, telling fans he's aiming for a second star on the shirt. The German will take over in January. Those are the headlines. I'll be back with the news at 6 o'clock.
Thanks very much, Lewis. Now, the weather brought to you by Manx Glass and Glazing. It has been so dreary today, hasn't it? And it's going to stay overcast with that extensive hill fog, occasional rain or drizzle this evening. It will clear to isolated showers overnight with light winds and temperatures of around 11 Celsius. Tomorrow, largely dry and bright, actually, with some sunny spells, moderate to fresh southerly winds and a highest temperature of around 15. And then Friday, it'll be dry and bright at first, but then rain will arrive from the west in the morning, and that will potentially turn quite heavy later in the day on Friday. Sunset this evening will be at 6:17, sunrise tomorrow morning 7:51.
Manx Glass and Glazing can supply and install single, double and triple glazing. Call 674 573 or visit the showroom on the Snugborough Trading Estate.
Many people are struggling. You can help by volunteering or making a donation to Isle of Man Food Bank, whether it be food or essential items or financial support. Please call 646 999, brought to you by Descon Office Interiors.
A great night's sleep got even better with Zed's Bedding Store. From quality Bell-Dorm bed linen and mattress protectors, fleece and woven throws to luxury duvets from the fine bedding company. Zed's Bedding Ramsey, next to Isle of Man Bank.
Reach the Isle of Man's biggest radio audience with Manx Radio. Airtime, sponsorship and digital opportunities available. For more information on how we can help your business grow its market share, contact the friendly, experienced team on sales at manxradio.com.
For a wide range of wood-burning stoves and a complete installation service, visit The Snug in Ramsey. And we don't stop there. Kiln-dried firewood and full aftercare service, including chimney sweeps and maintenance. Call The Snug in Ramsey.
You're listening to Update here on Manx Radio. It's coming up to 5:05. Lovely to have your company this evening. Let's start by telling you that it was a little bit tense in Tynwald this morning as the Chief Minister accused the former Health Minister of fabricating claims he wants to privatise the health service and accused Laurie Hooper of gaslighting Tynwald as a whole. Now, Alfred Cannon made the comments in the Islands Parliament this morning. They're in their second day of this month's sitting, the first after the summer recess. Sean Cowper has more details for us.
Mr Cannon rose to speak in a debate about Manx Care, but it was Mr Hooper's departure from the Department of Health and Social Care that still seemed to be on his mind as he addressed the chamber.
This, after all, was part of a contrived plan he had to rid himself of his responsibilities by seeking to stitch up his resignation through a series of actions that enabled him to, at least in his own mind, accuse the Council of Ministers and myself of wanting to privatise healthcare.
Hear, hear.
That statement on privatisation was, of course, a fabrication. It is a falsehood and a slur on the Council of Ministers.
With Mr Hooper not in attendance this morning, the comments raised some concern among other members.
Several times, I think, made me feel very uncomfortable that you are actually attacking the character of somebody and his motives, and he's not here to defend himself.
I do wonder if we're straying very close to the wind regarding impugning people's motives at this point, Ectrain.
Take the point, and I'd ask the Chief Minister to maybe curtail the language.
Mr Cannon continued.
What I wasn't expecting, though, was the gaslighting of Council to extend far beyond the confines of the Council chamber and indeed the subtlety of his double-edged tweets to encompass not only just Council but this chamber and the general public. Because it now emerges that he knew and was informed in April that Manx Care's financial planning was not effective or indeed a priority. He knew in April that an external body had told him that budget holders were in the dark and that operational activities were not being costed, and neither was there a long-term financial plan. He knew back in April that an external body had told him that finances were not even a major risk identified for board appraisal.
Shocking.
Instead of telling us this, instead of releasing that report, instead of taking direct action to get resolution, he decided that gaslighting the public that the service was underfunded was the best way forward to cover inaction.
Mr Hooper has responded to Mr Cannon's remarks on social media, writing, "Pretty desperate last-ditch attempt. Absolutely incredulous behaviour from someone who is supposed to be a leader. Not unexpected, though, and hopefully it shows what I've been up against. Are his ministers willing to stand behind someone who behaves like this?"
Sean Cowper reporting on what was a pretty explosive start to the second day of Tynwald this morning. It's the side comments you can hear from other members that are interesting sometimes. Coming up to 8 minutes past 5, we're going to stay on the same theme because one MHK is saying that health service funding options should be put out to a public referendum. The Douglas East member Joni Farragher resigned, as we know, from her position in the Department of Health and Social Care yesterday, shortly after the now former Health Minister. He had accused the Chief Minister of trying to privatise the NHS, as we know, something that Alfred Cannon has denied. But Ms Farragher believes it's important to involve the public in any of these decisions.
We have to have that whole bird's eye perspective. We can't just say, look, I don't agree with that, but I have no alternative. But it is actually quite difficult to provide the alternative when you're not sitting in a central government role, in Treasury Minister or Chief Minister's role. It is quite difficult to have that overall view of what the public finances look like. There are ways of raising additional revenue that Treasury seem to be ruling out with their taxation strategy that we just debated in March earlier this year. Most of the sort of ways that I would have thought about raising additional revenue were already ruled out, even though they said they were going to explore options. And I discussed that in the debate. I did say there's a tension here because you're saying you're going to explore options, but you've ruled them all out already in this strategy. It wasn't a strategy, by the way. It was just a set of policy principles. But that's where it feels to me we're failing, that we have a very fixed mindset on how we raise revenue, and it's purely to tax workers, and we need to look outside of that. I equally think that it's super important that we actually involve the public in these discussions. A lot of the discussions and debates that we've had around the future of healthcare have been behind closed doors, and that's felt to me very uncomfortable because this affects every single person on this island, and everybody should know about it. I think actually that we should put it out to a referendum, to be honest, to the Manx public. What is the future of healthcare, and how do we feel that it should be funded? Do we fundamentally still agree with the principle of free at the point of use, which I do, and I think the vast majority of people do? And if so, how can we ensure that our revenue raising is in line with what we need?
Do you think there is a solution to this?
There's a solution to everything. Yeah, there is absolutely no problem without a solution, but this solution will be complex, and it might involve things that people will find to be unpopular. And I think that's where the rub is, that politicians are very unwilling to do things that might be unpopular, and I don't know how we can get around that. You know, if we want to kind of progress as an island, we might need to look at how we're raising money, we might need to look at how our systems are set up, and we might need to look at our taxation system and reform of that.
That is Joni Farragher, MHK, talking to Phil Gaughan there. If you'd like to hear that interview in full, it's about 13 minutes or so. Actually, you can find it at manxradio.com in the latest episode of the newscast. What do you make of what she said there? Would you like to see a referendum on this issue about the future of healthcare? Do you have thoughts on how it should be funded? Free at the point of delivery or not? What do you reckon? You can text 166 177 or email studio@manxradio.com. There's going to be an open line on Man in Line tomorrow. It might be a good one to bring up on that programme. And if you've got any thoughts that you'd like to share for Man in Line, you can call the out of hours line, which is 682-631. But we're not over yet, because a Southern MHK believes the time is now to start having conversations around a potential no confidence vote in this current administration. Now, Tim Glover was speaking on Manx Radio Breakfast this morning. He described the scene that played out in Tynwald yesterday as a mess. Mr. Glover says he believes there is an enormous amount of discontent at the moment.
A leader brings people with him. Did he feel that he still was bringing people within the Honourable Court with him, and indeed people on the outside? And let's just look at the bare facts now. There are 5 ex-ministers now on the backbenches. So you have to question whether he is able to bring people with him.
After the budget earlier this year, you did invite the public to give you their thoughts on whether there needs to be a motion of no confidence. Do you think it is now the time for that?
Personally, yes. There's not been much chance for that to be discussed, because it was a pretty full-on day yesterday. But I'm sure that conversation will come up, and a lot of members fundamentally believe that the health service should be free at the point of entry. And I'm concerned that we're putting potentially balance sheets ahead of putting people in harm's way.
So would you like to see then that commitment from Comin for that free at the point of access?
I would. I mean, that was asked, and I think Manx Radio have asked that as well. And I didn't hear a clear answer from the Chief Minister. All I heard was a word soup.
Mr. Glover, I wonder about everybody listening now. You describe it as a mess, and I wonder if a number of our listeners think actually we don't care about who's falling out with who and exactly who the minister is. We just want this situation to be sorted at Manx Care, the funding. So how would you go about changing this situation, sorting out this mess as you describe it?
Well, it's all very well having calls for fiscal responsibility, but you've got to look at what Manx Care is providing. I think that now is the time where the Chief Minister and Comin should be talking to backbenchers about ideas for funding.
And just finally, if your phone were to ring, if the Chief Minister were to give you a call and invite you to be part of his Council of Ministers, he's got a vacancy, what would be your thoughts?
I'm no nodding dog.
I think that was a no. Tim Glover, MHK, speaking there on Breakfast this morning and introducing us to the word soup. 13 and a half minutes past 5, business now, and a parking suspension along Victoria Street in Douglas has been postponed after a cafe on the route said it wasn't consulted about it. Now, the owners of Forkit said they arrived there this morning to find the spaces blocked off by cones. The parking suspension relates to the nearby Villiers Square redevelopment, and the DOI says that the key issue is the long-term suspension of the bus stop on Lot Promenade, as the alternative arrangement is for buses to stop in Victoria Street instead. And this suspension would allow one bus to pass another that is waiting. So an agreement has been reached to postpone the suspension, monitor the effect this has on congestion in the city centre and see how it goes. NK Construction, who's carrying out the work, says letters were sent out before beforehand, but the cafe did not receive the correspondence. The stock market report is brought to us by Ramsey Crookall, and tonight they say that major European bourses turned mixed, even as chip stocks and luxury goods dipped following sales warnings. The US dollar firmed as investors priced out a hefty interest rate cut from the Federal Reserve at the next policy meeting. US crude futures edged lower after selling off steeply in the previous session on reports that Israel will not attack Iran's oil facilities. And gold advanced towards record highs as gains in non-yielding bullion were bolstered by weakness in US bond yields, with additional safe haven support from ongoing geopolitical conflicts. Well, the commodities, gold finished up 0.42% at $2,673. Brent off 0.79% at $73.80. At the close, the FTSE 100 was up 0.97% at 8,329. And a short time ago, the Dow Jones was trading up 0.45% at 42,931. And the Nasdaq was off just slightly, 0.01% at 18,314.
I'm running late again. Do you know where I put my car keys?
In the fridge.
Where's my phone?
Under the dog basket.
Bye.
You haven't forgotten that we're seeing Ramsey Crookall later?
Oh, no, of course not. 5 p.m, is it?
2:45.
I'll be there.
Life is busy. That's why Ramsey Crookall's team takes time to help you make a mindful investment decision, considering all the options, giving you full control of your financial future. Less stress, more assurance.
Forgot to put my shoes on.
Oh.
See how we can make your money work for you. Call 717171 or visit ramseycrookall.com. Licensed and regulated by the Isle of Man Financial Services Authority.
Manx Radio Travel, driven by Quayside Tyres and Service Centre.
Well, there is nothing specific to report on any of the roads policing pages, which is good news, but it is pretty murky out there, so do take care. And actually, we've had a text in from Rob who says, would people please turn off their high-intensity rear fog light if there is someone behind them, because then they know they're not the last in the line. So I think somebody getting blinded up there, probably on some of the higher routes. All looking okay down at the steam packet and the airport. In a moment, we'll run you through some of the road closures that there are in Peel ahead of the royal visit tomorrow. But as ever, if you spot anything else while you're out and about, 166 177, you can email studio@manxradio.com. And for the full list of traffic that's happening and all the roadworks everywhere, just go to manxradio.com and click on our traffic and travel hub.
Ask how you can spread the cost interest-free at Quayside.
It is 17 minutes past 5, and as you may have heard, the Isle of Man is going to welcome a royal visitor tomorrow. I bet she's glad it's not today, looking at the weather. Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal is visiting Peel. Simon Richardson is with me in the studio now to look at her busy schedule. First of all, Simon, have you got your hat ready?
I have indeed, yeah.
Yeah, I bet you have. So what do we know about this visit so far?
Well, Beth, assuming Manannán lifts his cloak, which he currently seems reluctant to do, at least here on the East Coast, Her Royal Highness will arrive at Cathedral Isle of Man for a Thanksgiving service at 11:35 in the morning, in her role as patron of the Cathedral of St German Peel Development Appeal. While there, she will unveil an engraved floor stone commemorating the £2 million reordering of the cathedral.
So do we know who else is going to be there?
Well, some 350 invited guests will be there, and the Princess Royal will meet some of the appeal donors, the project architects and engineers who've supported and worked on the restoration.
And I understand there is a second engagement in Peel as well.
Yes, Beth, Peel is the focus of the visit, and from the cathedral, the Princess Royal will make the short journey to the house of Manannán, arriving at about 1:15.
And do we know what she's going to do there?
She'll be guided through a tour of the All at Sea exhibition, which uncovers some of the tragic events in Manx waters that motivated Sir William Hillary to establish the RNLI 200 years ago. The royal visitor will meet representatives from the RNLI, from DEFRA, also from the fishing and farming industries, local businesses and some community organisations.
And as I just mentioned, Simon, there are some road closures and restrictions that people need to know about as well.
Yes, indeed, Beth, there will be, details of which can be found at gov.im/roadwatch. Also, though, there will be no public access to the House of Manannán Visitor Centre during the royal visit, And public car parking at the rear of the House of Manannan won't be available at all on Thursday until around 3:15pm. But as we know, these times can be somewhat fluid. I can confirm, though, that the coffee station next to the House of Manannan will remain open to the public during the visit. Maybe the Princess Royal will pop in for one before she heads home.
Who knows? Simon, thank you very much indeed. Just to let you know, there are parking restrictions from 6pm this evening until 3pm tomorrow on Athol Street and East Quay in Peel. You can find the full details at manxradio.com. Well, there has been a lot of debate over health services in recent days. We know that this has come after Manx Care announced some cutbacks to save money. And the chair of Ramsey Commissioners says the weekend closure of the minor injuries unit in the town is a turning of the screw to cutting services in the north. Rob Cowell believes he understands that savings need to be made, but that it should be a central government issue.
Is that services are being reduced, MIUs being closed at weekends. We've got to be very careful. This isn't the start of the turn of the screw, which I think it is. We dropped, and then you'll see a reduction further still in the MIU until the catastrophic nightmare of a complete closure of the site. Manx Care needs to be well aware that Ramsey are here, the north needs servicing, and that people won't stand by and just let them be rolled over.
Manx Care has to save money somewhere. It's been quite public this past week that is their objective, and they have to cut and drop services to do this. Where do you think those savings should come from if it's not from the minor injuries unit?
So obviously savings need to be made across Manx Care. Totally understand that. My main concern is around whether it's overspending or underfunding. There's a big question mark around that. The key thing here is taxation was increased purely as a health levy. So we've increased taxation and we are reducing services. Savings need to be made across government. This isn't something that should just be a health issue. This is something that should be a central government issue.
Why do you think the closure of the minor injuries unit will affect residents? Manx Care has said that the weekend closure of the site has been in place since July.
Yeah, it has been in place since July, and it was deemed at that point to be a staffing shortage, which we now know is not true. It's a funding shortage. It's got nothing to do with staffing levels. It's paramount to the north of the Isle of Man that we have an MIU centre. I think it should be a prime example of how other regions should be run. There should be a cottage hospital in the south of the Isle of Man, for example. All you're doing is going to take business away from one unit, so you're only driving traffic further away into an already busy unit, and I'm not convinced there's going to be a cost saving there at all.
That is Chair of Ramsey Commissioners Rob Cowell speaking to LDR reporter Emma Draper. 22 minutes past 5. Educating young people on the Isle of Man about being responsible about waste is key to stopping the problem from getting bigger. The founder of the clean-up charity Beach Buddies says he believes young people are often more receptive than adults. Bill Dale was on Man in Line today and told us why he spends so much time in island schools spreading the message about personal accountability.
If the adults are not going to bother and you have to almost abandon them, let them get on with it, the children are going to be the people who make decisions in a few years' time. They're going to be the, maybe a head of a department in any sort of a company. They'll remember, particularly if you come from the Isle of Man, that you can have clean beaches and you can have an environment where people recycle. We're very fortunate to have the energy from waste plant. I remember when the government bought that all those years ago, there was massive controversy because it was a lot of money. And people think, what are we doing buying a giant incinerator? But look at what it's done. We don't have any landfill anymore. Very little from the bottom ash from the incinerator. So, we have made some good decisions in the past, and government has been pretty supportive over the time. But without question, unless you educate people from a young age, they're not going to follow it through. So adults are more inclined or less inclined to do something about it. Children really do see the problem, and as I've said, in schools we get a fantastic feedback. It's been really good. I think one of the big problems here is that there is no accountability. There has been fly tipping all over the place for a very long time, of all sorts. Television's not far from here on the Marine Drive, and we had a recent incident where somebody's dumped a whole pile of cat litter on a beach. People are still doing that sort of thing, but when nobody is made accountable, then people are getting away with it. Consequently, it's going to continue to happen. And I'm a great believer that once a few penalties are imposed and people are fined a few £100, then maybe that will make a difference if it hits their pocket.
That is Beach Buddies founder Bill Dale, who was talking on Man and Line as one of the guests today. You can watch that programme back, incidentally, on our YouTube channel, or you can find it on our Facebook page. Rob Pritchard, our sports editor, is here now. And first of all, Rob, I did ask Simon if he had his hat ready for the royal visit tomorrow. I assume you do as well?
I do indeed.
Absolutely, of course you do. Lots of sports news happening?
Indeed. Well, we're going to start with tennis, and Isle of Man tennis star Billie Harris is officially out of this week's Shenzhen Open in China on the ATP Challenger Tour. The former Albany Lawn and Castertown Lawn player has been knocked out in the last 16 by Georgian player Saba Pertsaladze in straight sets, 4-6, 6-7. It's the same stage the former Ireland player reached in his last event, also in China at Hangzhou, getting to the final 16 before losing out to American Mackenzie McDonald. Well, Harris currently sits 110th in the ATP World Rankings, moving down 9 places from his career best of 101st in early September. Elsewhere, 2 of the Isle of Man's leading snooker players will embark on a series of international competitions from later this week. Darrell Hill and Dolan Mercer will represent the island at this year's EBSA European Team Snooker Championships in the Algarve, Portugal, from Friday until next Thursday. After this, Hill will then travel to Doha in Qatar to take part in the 2024 IBSF World Amateur Championships from the 1st to the 6th of November. Well, at the EBSA tournament, the pairing have been drawn in a group alongside France 1, Poland 1 and Denmark. Meanwhile, at the IBSF competition, Hill, due to his performance at the same event in 2023, in which he reached the last 16, will proceed straight to the last 48 phase. And in motorsport, Isle of Man TT and British Superbike Championship competitor Josh Brooks will leave FHO Racing at the end of the current season. The team has confirmed the rider won't continue with them in 2025. Brooks himself has taken to social media to thank team principal Fei Ho and the entire crew for all their hard work over the last 2 years. Meanwhile, Fei Ho has also paid tribute to Brooks' efforts, saying she'd like to thank him for his dedication and hard work and wishes him all the best for the future. Well, since 2023, Brooks has represented FHO at the Isle of Man TT. This year, he claimed a podium and second place in the 2024 senior race, whilst managing an 11th place finish in the Superstock TT Race 1. He was a retirement in the Superbike race.
Thank you very much indeed, Rob. All the motorsport news coming. We're well ahead of the 2025 season. We expect to see who's going to be else riding for FHO. You never know. Anybody you've heard about? Anything on the cards? Spill the gossip, Rob. Come on.
There's all sorts of rumours going around, but you just don't know at this point. This is the typical time of the year you would like to say that, of course, the British season coming to an end, and then all the preparations start going into January, February, March when testing starts up again. It's a really tight turnaround if you think of it in the grand scheme of things. So you would expect a lot of developments within a lot of teams, whether it's in terms of riders or personnel, will happen over the coming months. So, but there's all sorts of names being banded around, but nothing verified or concrete as of yet.
Oh, Rob's giving nothing away there. Nothing away at all. Just a couple of things I want to mention before we finish tonight. First of all, a very happy birthday to Phyllis Costain, who is 100 today, formerly of Ballabeg. She now lives at the Silverdale Care Home in Ballasalla. So, Phyllis, many, many happy returns from us all here at Manx Radio. And just a reminder that ahead of tomorrow's royal visit in Peel, there are some parking restrictions from 6 p.m. So they're starting in about half an hour around Peel. That's on Athol Street and in East Quay as well. And also the stretch of East Quay past the House of Manannan will be closed tomorrow from 6 a.m. until 3 p.m. So that is all from Update this evening. Thank you so much as ever for being with us, and you can find out much more about all tonight's top stories at manxradio.com. It's Spotlight next with Howard Kane, a look at what's happening in the world of arts and culture on the Isle of Man, brought to us by Isle of Man Arts Council. Then it's Greatest Hits Live with Jason Moore from 6, Country Roads from 9 with Andy Wint, and Rhiann Evans will be with you from 10 with After Hours. Whatever you're up to tonight, have a lovely evening, and we'll see you back here on Update at the same time tomorrow.